My name is Jade, and this happened to us 5 years ago now when I was 16 years old. It all started on a stormy night when my dad, who is a renowned archaeologist, asked me to babysit my younger siblings, Lily and Max, while he met with someone from a local university about organizing a seminar on some artifacts that he had discovered while in Jordan 20 years ago. For reference, my two brothers and I live with my father because he was awarded custody in a divorce due to my mother's history of alcohol abuse. Sorry if that's too much information, but I've never gotten over losing her in the way that I did. Anyway, I agreed, not knowing that that night would be anything but ordinary. With my siblings settled down for the night, I ordered some food from a new restaurant that left its menu on my doorstep earlier that day. I called in an order, plopped down on the couch, and surfed Netflix for a movie to watch. About 50 minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and a delivery person with a hooded jacket claimed to have my food. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a man in his 30s who gave me a smile and promptly handed me the food. After I paid for the food, he asked me if it was possible to use the bathroom, telling me that it was an emergency. Well, I was a little taken off guard by the request and found myself agreeing before I was really able to think about it. He was only in there a couple minutes before he came out, thanked me, and then left. I don't know what, but I started to get an uneasy feeling about this guy, so I watched him through the peephole, walk down the walkway, into his car, and eventually drive away. I put the chicken tacos down on the dining room table and sat back down on the couch when I noticed the rain and the thunder sounding unusually loud compared to before. It sounded like the door was open somewhere and the storm was literally in the house. As I roamed through the house and the hallways, I noticed it was coming from the guest bathroom. When I went in there, I saw that the window was wide open. I never used this bathroom myself, but assumed it was always kept locked. The truth is, I wasn't sure. It very well may have been unlocked or left open for some unknown reason. I closed the window and made sure it was locked this time, and went back to the movie and my tacos. I ended up falling asleep on the couch before the movie had even ended. At some point in the middle of the night, I was awakened by something but didn't know what. All I can hear was the sound of the rain coming down, although it had lightened up a little bit at this point. I got up to go to the kitchen to get a glass of water, and that's when I heard the sound of scraping and rattling, and it was coming from that same bathroom. I started to panic, even though I mustered up the courage to go investigate. That's when I saw a shadow behind the window. Someone was trying to pry the window open. I yelled out in a trembling voice that the cops are on their way, and then ran back to call my dad, and then he dialed the police. I woke up my two brothers and led them into my dad's study, a secure room with a heavy door, and instructed them to stay inside and not to come out. Armed with a baseball bat now, I positioned myself in the hallway, shaking with fear but ready to confront the intruder. The adrenaline surged through me as I waited for the police to arrive. At only 16 years old, I was terrified but determined to protect me and my little brothers. Finally, the police arrived with their sirens blaring. I saw the flashing lights illuminate the darkened street. I opened the door for them and saw my father running up the walkway as well. By this time, the intruder was long gone, and I was now being questioned by the police. I told them everything about that night. I suspected that the delivery man from the restaurant must have left the window unlocked when he used the restroom with the intent of coming back and burglarizing our home, or worse. But I had no way to prove it. The police followed up on the restaurant owner and discovered that the delivery guy had a criminal record for several attempted break-ins. Last I heard, he was fired but not arrested, as they could not prove that it was actually him. Of course, my father praised me for my quick thinking and my bravery, but for the next few weeks, I really had a hard time sleeping in fear of that man coming back. But as time went on, my anxiety started to fade, and soon life went back to normal. In my childhood home, there was a memorable incident that occurred when I was 10 years old. It was a hot summer night, and my 16-year-old brother was babysitting me as usual, as sometimes my father worked nights. On this particular night, my brother informed me that he was going to a concert that he had planned and made me promise not to tell our dad. He had never left me home alone before, but honestly, I didn't care at all and was perfectly comfortable with him not being there. In fact, I took advantage of the situation and stayed up late. After playing video games for a few hours, I decided to step onto the back deck to get some fresh air and enjoy the peacefulness of the surroundings. Little did I know, in that calming moment, my life would soon be changed forever. As I sat outside, strange noises began coming from inside the house. The sounds were unfamiliar, but definitely sounded like they were man-made. Instinctively, I froze, straining my ears to try to determine the source of the offending sounds. It became evident that someone was moving about inside, someone who shouldn't have been there. My heart was pounding so hard in my chest that I could feel it in my ears. As scared as I was, I also realized that I had to do something. Our family had always kept a few firearms for personal protection, and this was a situation that called for one of those. I ran upstairs and retrieved my father's loaded .45 caliber pistol from his bedroom cubbyhole. Filled with a mix of fear and determination, I proceeded to investigate. Creeping silently through the house, I noticed that the usual entry points were locked. However, a realization struck me. The basement. It was an unconventional way to enter, but one that had an access hatch to the house. I cautiously approached the door that opened to the basement stairs while holding the .45 in my outstretched arms. Keeping the light off on my side, I opened the door and looked down the wood staircase. Normally it'd be pitch black, but I quickly noticed there was a dim light in the basement swirling around, and then I heard the unmistakable sound that I heard earlier, only this time it was much more clear and defined. The fear in me came to a fever pitch, and my blood ran cold as reality kicked in. I was interrupting an intruder in the act, and this could end very badly. As I stood at the top of the stairs, I flipped on the light, and with my entire body trembling, I screamed that I had a gun and squeezed off a shot down into the basement. I can hear the sound of glass breaking and boxes being pushed aside. The intruder was in a mad scramble, but I stood my ground at the top of the stairs, holding the pistol straight forward. Suddenly there was silence. I waited for what had to be at least 1 full minute, but seemed like 10, before I started slowly going down the stairs, cautiously looking below each step into the part of the basement that I could not see from the top of the stairs. By the time I got to the bottom, it was clear that the basement was now empty, and the intruder had run out through the same hatch, which was his point of entry. It took time for the adrenaline to subside, and for my racing heart to regain its normal rhythm. The incident left an indelible mark in my memory. I grew up that day, my innocence gone in an instant, and although I was still a young child, I learned more about myself than most people my age ever do. Turns out I'm not someone who will run from their fears, and although the experience was traumatizing for me, it left me proud and confident in myself. And that has stuck with me my entire life. This all happened when I was 16 years old. It was summer break. My parents had gone on a weekend cruise to Ensenada. Being alone for a few days was nothing unusual since they trusted me to handle it. Before leaving, my mom filled the fridge with her famous shrimp gumbo and a tub of fried chicken from the market. My first day alone went on without a hitch, and I spent most of the day in the woodworking shed finishing a bookshelf that I had been making. I should have mentioned that my father is a woodworking guru, and so he has a dedicated space and a converted garage detached from the house. His passion rubbed off on me, and I've become pretty good at making furniture myself. It would be fair to say that his passion is my obsession, and this obsession probably saved me from a potentially deadly situation, as you will soon hear. It is now the second night alone. I lost track of time and stayed up until the early hours of the morning finishing and sanding and staining my project. When I finally took a break and looked at my watch, it was already after 2:00 a.m. But I still wasn't ready for bed. I took a break and drank an energy drink. Crazy, I know, but I'm addicted to these things. Then I scrolled through social media for a while. Suddenly I heard footsteps and the sound of whispering coming from the backyard in between the house and the workshop where I was. I walked over to the window and peeked through the closed blinds. At first I didn't see anything, but soon enough I saw 2 men coming around the side of the house to the backyard and starting to look through the window of the master bedroom and then the living room. I couldn't see their faces because they had their backs to me, but they both had on dark clothes and were each holding some objects. One was holding what looked like a crowbar, and the other had a large back that looked empty in one hand, and what could have been a screwdriver or knife in the other. As you can imagine, the sight was absolutely terrifying. Holding my breath, I stood frozen and tried to let go of the blinds gently, hoping they didn't turn around and see them moving. I had the cell phone in my hand, but there was no way I was going to dial 911 and risk them hearing me. I stood in the corner in the dark and waited for them to either leave or enter my house so I could make the call. Suddenly I heard footsteps approaching the garage and the doorknob rattle. Holy crap! I nearly had a heart attack at that moment. There were tools in the shed that I could certainly use as a weapon, but in the dark there's no way I'd find anything, and there's two of them and only one of me. I braced myself for what would happen next. One of the men cupped his hands to the window and tried to look inside the blinds, but they were solid. After what seemed like an eternity, but was probably just a few seconds, I heard the other one say, "It's just a garage, man. Let's not waste time on this." And with that, they went back towards the house. I listened intensely for any sounds to inform me as to where they were, but I didn't hear anything. At least not for a couple of minutes. I finally heard the faint sounds of glass breaking. They broke into my house, and that was my cue. I walked slowly in the dark and sat in the furthest corner of the garage to dial 911. When I heard the operator say, "911, what's your emergency?" it was surreal, like I was in a movie. I whispered to the operator that I needed the police ASAP and gave her my address. I was so scared of being heard by those guys that my voice wasn't even audible, and I had to repeat myself twice to the operator before she assured me the police were on their way. She urged me to stay on the phone with her and not to come out of the shed until the cops arrived. It didn't take long before I heard the sirens of the police cars in the distance and getting louder as they approached my street. That's when I also heard what sounded like a frantic exit of the two men as they ran out of the house, through the backyard, and past my shed. They must have hopped the backyard fence and ran into the neighbor's yard. I conveyed to the operator this information, which she then related to the police officers who were quickly approaching. When the police showed up at my house, I notified the operator and came out of the shed holding my cell phone with both my hands up in the air. I then pointed to the back fence that the men had used as a getaway route. The policeman assured me that another unit was pursuing them, and not even a few minutes later I saw a police helicopter with spotlights circling my neighborhood. In the end, both men were caught and arrested for breaking and entering. I later learned that the same two men had committed a series of burglaries in the surrounding areas, two of which also ended up with an aggravated assault on the homeowner who happened to be home at the time of the burglary. The police hailed me as a hero for my quick thinking and for helping me get two dangerous criminals off the street. Looking back at it, I'm just thankful that my passion for woodworking had led me to a late-night obsession that very well could have saved my life. Under normal circumstances, I would have been in my room at that hour. The event has left scars on me, however, and I get a little jumpy whenever I hear noises at night, especially when I'm alone.